The year is 1982, and this saw the release of TIMERIDER, the adventure of Lyle Swann, directed by William Dear, the director of Harry and the Hendersons. And this one stars Fred Ward, Belinda Bauer, and Peter Coyote. Now, this is actually a little bit like Back to the Future, although this movie actually predates Back to the Future. Now, this is a 1982 movie, so this review is going to have spoilers in it. Sorry if you haven't watched it. The focus is clearly on Lyle Swann, who is in the 80s, at that time, the modern time, and he is a motorcycle racer who's doing a kind of cross-country race. He has kind of like a fairly kind of high-tech setup for the time, and unbeknownst to him, the government are actually doing experiments in time travel around that area, because they're doing it in secret. No one knows that this thing is actually kind of going on, and just when their kind of experiment goes off, Lyle manages to get caught up in this kind of time-travelling kind of field and ends up going back 105 years to 1875. Now, he has no idea that he is driven back to the past, but the kind of the locals, at this point, effectively the Wild West, all think he's some type of demonic force, El Diablo. That they obviously, we get a band of kind of outlaws want this machine for themselves and things like this. And effectively, it is a kind of clueless Lyle Swann kind of blundering his way through the past, not really knowing what's going on, whilst dealing with obviously a fish out of water kind of scenario, outlaws that want to kill him, and even though are kind of people who are a little bit more friendly are a little bit aggressive, you might say. What will happen? You'll have to watch it all to find out. I'm not going to spoil everything for you here, but I'm going to address a couple of points. What do I like about this movie? I saw this one back in the VHS days, and I actually quite enjoyed it. It was quite a charming movie. It's not really an action film. It's actually relatively gently paced, shall we say. I wouldn't say it's slow necessarily, but it's a gentle film with not huge amounts of stuff actually happening, if we're being honest. But nonetheless, I kind of found it charming. So on this rewatch, I have to say I really liked Belinda Bauer in this role, because she's very much a different type of female lead to, I think, many other movies of this kind of ilk. She's very aggressive, she's very kind of like taking charge, and she effectively rapes for the Fred Ward character at gunpoint, telling him to kind of get undressed and things like that. You don't see that in so much in films. But I quite liked her forthcomingness and her just kind of like no BS kind of attitude. And the movie, although it's not a comedy, obviously it has some comedic moments with these kind of like both people from the past not realising what's kind of going on with the Lyle Swann character, and obviously his reactions to everything, just thinking everyone's mad, and very kind of rural kind of background. So there is some kind of like some kind of quite comedic moments. And we have a kind of a group of outlaws led by Peter Coyote's character, who are dastardly and everything, and obviously clearly the bad guys. We have a fairly good kind of shootout towards the end of the movie. And I have to say, despite this movie lacking some characterization, what we did get, I think, was quite solid. I mean, we were introduced to a couple of kind of sub-characters. This preacher who seems to have a little bit of an infatuation with Michelle Bauer's character. We have a couple of lawmen that show up that have kind of beef with the outlaws and things. So there is some good character work here. There's not just much of it, but what we do get, I actually do quite enjoy. You might be a little bit of a hint to one of my negatives just there. I actually did like the reactions of our kind of Old West kind of style characters and their reactions to Lyle Swann. I think they seemed kind of quite believable, and you can understand their kind of point of view. They don't understand the technology, but they kind of understand that the bike is like a machine. They just have never seen anything like that and stuff. Now, in 1982, this Lyle Swann's got like a somewhat of a Knight Rider-y kind of style helmet, which is kind of science fiction even by today's standards. But nonetheless, the kind of the culture clash was kind of quite fun. And although I have some problems with the Lyle Swann character, I still quite enjoyed him just kind of like bungling his way through this this adventure, not really knowing what's going on and just being completely clueless the whole time, and not understanding what the situation that he's actually in, not until the very end of the movie. I quite like that. I actually did like the kind of the romantic kind of sequences with the Fred Ward and Belinda Bauer character, because they're very short and admittedly a little bit underdeveloped, but you could have still felt that connection. And it's one of these things where, a little bit like Evil Dead 2, they set something up in the middle of the movie and it kind of pays off at the end. You're thinking, and that's kind of going to be the big spoiler, really. So I still quite like that. And I've got to say, it's a gentler film, but it's quite a fun adventure. There's likeable characters, an interesting kind of premise, bad guys you can kind of like, you can boo, hiss at, and a quite kind of charismatic and funny kind of setup and character. And, a pretty good female lead, I have to say. And, the kind of the action stuff is kind of well put together. I thought the kind of the Old West seems kind of run down, everyone's dirty, so I quite like that kind of approach to it. What doesn't work, I mean, like I've said, I like the characterization that we did get, but we just don't get that much. I mean, we really don't even see the Fred Ward character or hear of him probably until a good 20-25 minutes into the movie. We get no real character of him. He's just is a guy who ends up in the past. So we never really see him in the present, or 1982's present, and then back in the kind of the past. It's all kind of just anecdotal about his kind of experiences and stuff in the kind of the present. So it's a real lack of characterization, I think, and it's lucky that I think we have charismatic actors, I think, can do some of the heavy lifting that the kind of the writing doesn't. For example, we have this kind of with the kind of the B characters, the kind of supporting cast. We have this kind of rivalry between the two kind of sheriffs and the three outlaws. But again, there's one line of dialogue and that's all you get. But obviously, we understand that there's some beef there. Again, it could have been a little bit more expanded upon. The kind of the priest that sometimes is an ally, but is a little bit kind of antagonistic. It's never really expanded upon. We see him, it's hinted at that he's got like a fascination with the Belinda Bauer character, and he looks like he's about to kind of like double cross them from time to time, but he never does. And again, it's just not expanded upon. I mean, you could arguably say it works in some aspects, but you just feel this movie could have had a little bit more to it, a little bit meat on the bones, because when it's all said and done, the actual plot in regards to what happens, like events in the film, there's not that much there. I mean, ultimately, he runs across a bunch of people, they want the bike, they get the bike, he gets the bike back and saves the girl. And that's kind of it. It's not a complex plot. It's kind of a little bit meandering at times, and I don't know, it just could have a little bit more meat on the bones. There are a couple of inconsistencies if you want to look at logic. For example, this is going to be the spoiler here. As it turns out, the Belinda Bauer character is either the grandmother or the great-grandmother of actually Fred Ward's Lyle SWANN character. So effectively he's had sex with either his great-grandmother or grandmother, because he refers to her as both. So you're not quite sure which one it is. I mean, I'm guessing it would be great-grandmother, but they specifically say grandmother at one point. But yeah, the kind of the distance in time would lead me to say great-grandmother. But anyway, so yeah, so there's that kind of incest situation there. But that presents various paradoxes. There's a couple of other kind of things here. Again, the time travel aesthetic hasn't really quite been kind of thought out quite as much as, say, Back to the Future, which came out a few years later. So things have changed in the past. There's no real kind of ramifications. Even the idea of this government experiment doing the time travel, experiment in the first place, there's no real mention of not changing stuff in the past, stuff like that. So it's just kind of brushed under the rug. It's just kind of like, yeah, we went back to the past. A lot of people ended up dying because of this kind of situation, and it is what it is. So time travel is always a little bit of a tricky subject, because you come up with loads of problems, and this one decides just not to worry about it. It doesn't matter. But despite some of its story elements here, I have to say I enjoy this movie. Despite it maybe lacking a little bit in characterization, I think the characterization that we do get is good enough, I think, to make us understand the motivations of the characters to at least to a point. And although I would have certainly liked more from the Lyle SWANN character, it was enough. And I say Fred Ward's charismatic performance, I think, can carry this movie through. It's not the most action-packed movie. More could have been done with it, but it's a fun, gentle time travel movie to some degree. And if you like westerns and you want throw a bit of sci-fi in there, I would advise checking this one out. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. I actually do think it is a fun, if not kind of earth-shattering kind of movie in any way. So yeah, a 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen this somewhat kind of forgotten about 80s movie? If you have, please do let me know your thoughts on it, and I look forward to reading them in the comments. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next time.